Good evening, Epsom speakers, a legendary club in South London. 54 years old this year, but I haven't had the opportunity to go until today. I've met many of you, it's my pleasure to be there tonight. I've got a lot of people to evaluate as general evaluator, but I'm going to start off by focusing on the 4 speech evaluators. We had Mark evaluating Fatai's speech. Mark started off and really peppered the objective of the speech throughout his evaluation. This is a really good thing to do because it gives you a structure, it gives you a framework, and sometimes we tend to forget that we don't do the speech just for the sake of speaking with a topic, but because we want to meet a number of objectives. So it's always good to remember how we did or perhaps didn't do against these objectives. So really well done. Some good observation, especially a good observation about the use of nose and the fumbling around. But there was something a little bit missing there, and that's my first suggestion for improvement. I would have liked to know more about the why. Why was the fumbling around at the start a bit of a distraction, and how could it potentially be avoided in the future? Personally, when we give feedback, I think it's always very important to focus on the why, the how, and the what. And one thing to do better as evaluator is really just to mention what was done well, how it could be done differently, and why is this important or not. In this case, the use of notes, it can be a distraction for the audience, but it can also be a stressor for the speakers. Like you just fumble something and the stress levels go up because this is the start and the start is not going well. But overall, a really thorough evaluation that used the objective of the speech as a framework. Amanda was the second evaluator. Amanda is a really experienced Toastmaster and she had a lot to say about our speaker, which was mapped. There were a lot of references to the speech, the content of the speech, even elements of the structure as well. And she, for example, mentioned that there were elements of the structure of the speech that were really well done. It's always good to see a speaker focusing on the content and the structure of a speech, because when we speak outside of Toastmaster, content will be king. People may or may not notice the ums and ahs, some of them will, some of them won't. But if we have a message that is really well structured and really impactful, people will judge us on that. So it's always good that we remind ourselves as evaluators to pay some attention to the content. I do have a challenge and some suggestions for improvement for Amanda as an evaluator. Amanda is very structured when she does evaluation. She's got a recommendation, and an extensive summary. This is the classic formula for winning an evaluation contest, except that this is not an evaluation contest tonight. What I would like to see Amanda doing is to move away from that formula. That can be a bit of a straitjacket. Have things moving a bit more fluidly, maybe less emphasis on the summarizing and perhaps more emphasis on the meat of the evaluation itself. The challenge for Amanda is ditch the notes. She's a really experienced Toastmaster. She's been doing it for far longer than I have. Don't use your notes, you don't need them. Costa was our third evaluator to evaluate a persuasive speech, Julia's speech. Costa was very observant. He had a lot of observation about the body language, the vocal variety of the speakers, and their use of eye contact. And he also asked a question as well, was I persuaded, were we persuaded about the speech? And this links into a suggestion for improvement. I would love to see this question expanded on a lot more. Personally, I felt that as a persuasive speech, there were a lot of good elements in it. Did it persuade me? It piqued my interest, but it perhaps didn't persuade me completely. Which is still fine, because on the kind of spectrum of being a meat eater and a flexitarian, the speech may have moved me slightly towards the flexitarian direction, which is instead a form of persuasion. But really, let's explore more that question. If we have to evaluate an informative speech, did we learn something? If it is inspired, where we inspired, do we feel differently as a result? If it's a persuasive speech, where we persuaded to consider the value of the argument? Let's always try and focus on that when we evaluate a persuasive speech. The way we can do it is maybe a short audience poll, or maybe link back to us how it persuaded us and what we learned in that way. Penny was a fourth evaluator to evaluate Charlie's speech. Penny is another superbly experienced Toastmaster, and it shows in her confidence and in her delivery. She's extremely lively when she uses her voice. Excellent voice projection, very crisp pronunciation as well. It is almost a delight to listen to her. What was really well as well in this case is that she knew the speaker extremely well. which is always an occasion where we can hark back to what the speaker's done well in previous speeches and portray a progression, and also make some small comments that are really personal. But this is a fine balance to strike. This speech evaluation I felt was a good evaluation, but I would have liked to learn more about the speech and not necessarily so much about the speaker sometimes. There were times where I like, how could this speech be done better to inspire somebody that's not yet a Toastmaster member? How could this speech be useful perhaps in an open house meeting to really rally the people around? This was an attempt at an inspirational speech. There were inspirational elements in that speech. I'd love to see the evaluators focusing on that a lot more. The challenge I would have to all the evaluators here is focus on the why more, and let's avoid some subtle uses of you. Whenever we start to say your speech, your evaluation, where there is a change in the atmosphere of the room, it's become less of a speech and more of a conversation. Other functionaries this evening, Acting President Mark Peacock, always opened with the history. This is not something I see people often do, but this is a club with a long and really prestigious history, and I always feel it's very important to focus on that, and he did that really well. And also emphasize the scale of the Toastmaster organisation. Scale requires perhaps a bit more energy, and my challenge for Mike, when he's going to be doing the president role full time in a couple of years, or maybe next year, you never know, is really to ramp up the energy level. The room is fairly big, it's also in a shape where the sound's going to travel at the back, so let's try and project our voice if we can. Toastmaster of the meeting, Gillian. Gillian is really quiet, really soft-spoken. I love that, because it's reassuring. If I might be a slightly nervous speaker or nervous presenter, Gillian would kind of be reassuring me. She would say, it's fine, and you need that. What I would like to challenge Gillian on a little bit is perhaps to be a little bit more open with her body language and a little bit more energetic. This takes time, this takes practice, but if she combines this open body language and a bit more energy with a kind of warm, fuzzy feeling as well, this has the making of a very, very strong meeting facilitator and somebody that people could almost instinctively look to in a crisis, which could be a very good asset for as a leader. I'm conscious I saw the red lights. Timekeeper, how long do I have left? Okay, I've been allowed to carry on.
7 minutes 30.
I will be focusing my attention very carefully. Table topics, Master Richard. Good twist on the usual table topic question. Basically, it was not to answer the question. This is a good twist on seeing when we do these special table topics, we've got to be careful of the guest. But what Richard did really well is that he gave us some tips. You don't have to answer the question, you can go on a tangent. It basically almost as if we had a mini blueprint that perhaps could have been even written on the flip chart on how to approach the topic. Challenge, always explain why the table topics are important, why they matter, and how they're going to help us as speakers. Because we gain confidence, we sharpen our wits and our mind, and this can help us in all kinds of social situations. John was a table topics evaluator. Table topics evaluator is a tough job to do. There's a lot to evaluate in a short space of time. John did it well, but I feel that John needs to quicken his pace a little bit when doing table topics evaluation. The recommendation for everybody, great. For table topics, I'd suggest having a recommendation, and then moving on to the next person. Otherwise, it would be very easy to run out of time, especially if there are 10 or 12 people to evaluate potentially. So just speed up the pace a little bit, just focus more, razor sharp, because time is very short. I do have a couple more things I could say about the club, but I'm really conscious of time. So any more feedback, just come and find me after the meeting. And that's back to Gillian, I believe.